Hello, and welcome to this Federal Real Property Profile Management System Data Submission Process Training Session. Thank you for taking the time to learn with us. As you may be aware, the FRPP management system was created to centralize information and promote the efficient and economical use of the federal government's real property assets. As you can see here on the screen, we are required by law and executive order to submit and collect this data annually. As a reminder, all of your submissions for fiscal year 2017 will be due by December 15th, 2017. For those of you reviewing this recording, if you would like a copy of the presentation that I used during the session, please contact Chris Conany, the FRPP MS application owner. Lastly, before we begin, I would like to note that during the demonstration portions of the session, I will be utilizing a training sandbox environment specifically meant for this purpose. Please be aware that the fiscal year rollover has not yet occurred on the system. As well, you will see fiscal year 2016 data, although the reporting requirements are consistent with 2017 standards. Thank you again for joining, and let's get started. Today's training objectives are broken up into two sections: fiscal year business rule updates and data submission tasks. Overall, by the end of this training, we expect that you will be able to identify the fiscal year 2017 business rule updates, locate the FRPP management system data dictionary, modify, add, and remove a singular asset record through the user interface, modify, add, and remove multiple asset records using XML, recognize and apply troubleshooting strategies to mitigate potential data submission errors, conduct an administrative search for users, perform an administrative asset inventory clearance, and contact technical support as issues arise. To help you accomplish the stated training objectives, we will cover the topics listed here. I will start off the training by providing a brief update on the fiscal year 2017 business rules. Next, I will review the various system user roles that may be assigned to your account, as there is a separation of duties when submitting, reviewing, and validating your data. Then I will discuss the different ways that users can access the platform. For the sake of time, we have included an appendix at the end of the presentation being used where you can review some information about basic account maintenance, such as resetting your password. After that, I will review and demonstrate the two methods available for you to submit asset information into the system. The first method is to manually add individual assets through the user interface and web form. The second method is to upload multiple records through the use of XML files. Along with these methods, I will cover how to modify and delete records and review the included error reports to assist you with troubleshooting. Next, I will show you how to search for assets and discuss various summary reports that will be useful to you as you go through the data submission and confirmation process. Now, there are a few administrative functions that an agency administrator should be aware of, so I will cover those towards the end. And lastly, we want to be sure that everyone knows how to contact the help desk in case that you encounter issues as you use the system or have any questions. First, let us start reviewing some important fiscal year 2017 business rule updates. I would like to bring your attention in particular to the new data elements displayed on this and the next slide. These also can be found in the FRPP MS data dictionary and will be highlighted for your convenience. Please use this presentation or the data dictionary as a point of reference for the new elements. As I proceed into the demonstration portion, I will review where these appear in the system as well. Here is a continued list of the new data elements. In the case you are not aware, you can find the updated data dictionary at www.gsa.gov/data dictionary. I'll remind you a couple of times throughout the presentation where you can find this, but in the presentation you can use the link here as well. Okay, next I will review the system user roles and login process. Now, there are 9 different user roles in the system that you should be aware of. It is important to know the difference between these roles because it will help you understand what your responsibilities are. It is important to note that roles are typically assigned at either the agency or bureau level as indicated in the access role name. Also, as you see in the note at the bottom of the slide, agency-level user roles have access to all of the assets for the agency, while bureau-level user roles only have access to the assets for the bureau within the agency to which they are assigned. Starting at the top, we have the data submission/stage users for both the agency and bureau level. Individuals with these roles can submit data in bulk for their assigned agency or bureau via an XML file. They can only attach, validate, and correct data that was staged using an XML file. Staging means that they can set up the file to be uploaded and the system will verify and validate the information. Once the information is validated, the agency admin uploads the information into the system. We will see this shortly as we review a process diagram. The right users for both the agency and bureau level can upload the data from an XML file after the data submission/stage user attaches, verifies, and validates it. Right users at both levels also can complete any manual data entry in the system, as well as manually edit asset records that are already listed in an agency or bureau's inventory. Now lastly, as we see here, the agency administrator can view, edit, and delete data for his or her assigned agency. In essence, a user with this role can do everything mentioned above and can be responsible for uploading and submitting the data. These users are the ones responsible for completing the data submission process for the fiscal year. For the sake of this training, we will be focusing on the tasks, features, and functions available to these roles. However, there are 4 remaining roles of which you should be aware. There also is the FRPP MS System Administrator role. This role can access and review any data for any agency or bureau and is limited to GSA program staff and contractors supporting the system. The read-only users for both the agency and bureau level have access to view information for their assigned agency or bureau. The users cannot submit or edit any data. These users are typically managers with a need to see information on the assets at the agency or bureau level once the data has been submitted and validated. Their main role is to perform an asset search, which we will review during today's session. Lastly, there's the data anomaly user, which has access to the data anomaly reports and the anomaly validation and verification tab. As we get to the demonstration portion, I will remind you where you can see which roles have been assigned to your account. Now that you have a better understanding of the system user roles, I'd like to review the system login page and then discuss the 3 methods available to access the system. The site is located at www.realpropertyprofile.gov, and the login page is broken up into 4 main sections. Up here on the top left, we see the About FRPP MS area. It is a brief statement of the system's purpose. The Summary Report section at the bottom left provides access to summary reports in PDF format. The Resources and Contact area at the bottom middle provides access to helpful links related to your use of the platform and important contact information. Lastly, at the far right, the login form provides 3 ways to access the system. We will now review the login form a bit more closely. As you can see from the screenshot, there are 3 ways to log into FRP MS. Using OMB Max Authentication, using your FRPP MS username and password, and subsequently a code, and for GSA staff only, using your GSA SSO credentials. Due to updated IT security requirements, the FRPP MS login process uses 2-factor authentication for each process. As an example, shown here on the right is the 2nd factor screen users will encounter after entering their FRPP MS username and password. Upon each login attempt with this method, users will receive an email which contains a code to enter at this step. Once entered, users can click the Next button and access the FRPP MS Home tab. In the case you do not have OMB Max authentication and need more information on how to register, please use the URL provided in the appendix of this presentation or shown here on the slide. As a reminder, as with other systems, your FRPP MS passwords will need to be reset every 90 days. In the case that you forget your password, we have included instructions in Appendix A of this presentation on how to reset. And once in the system, you're then able to begin to perform your work. As I mentioned earlier, there are two main ways to submit your data in the system. One, you can enter individual records by completing the web form in the system. And two, you can submit multiple records through creating and uploading XML files. For agencies or bureaus with only a few properties, we suggest adding and updating individual assets through the web form. For larger agencies with many properties, we recommend using the XML template and bulk submission process. I now will begin with an overview and demonstration of the individual property submission, modification, and removal processes. Now this slide contains a high-level process diagram of the individual property record submission, modification, and deletion processes. First, at the beginning of each new fiscal year, the GSA conducts a fiscal year rollover process. This means that they copy all of the existing assets from the previous year and save them in the application so that agencies do not need to start from scratch. Then, the agency or bureau right users have two options. They can either manually locate the existing assets in the application, update the assets as needed, particularly to comply with any new business rules, and save the changes. The system will then run reports against current business rules. Alternatively, rather than updating the existing assets, they can individually remove the existing ones and add new records. Similar to the update process, they would enter the information, save the assets, and then the reports and validation process can begin. After either option is completed, the agency administrator will be responsible for running reports and confirming the data is accurate and complete. Now, as we saw in the process diagram, one of the ways to submit information is through updating existing records after the fiscal year rollover process has been completed. You will notice that the steps to modify an existing record will be similar to the steps to delete a record. As such, I've included that here as well. To update an existing asset record, agency or bureau right users or agency administrators can follow these steps. First, after login, you would select the Asset Search tab. On the Asset Search page, be sure to select the correct fiscal year. The current fiscal year is typically the default setting. As a reminder, for training purposes, the screenshot denotes 2016. In the production system, you are not able to edit previous fiscal year data. Next, select your corresponding reporting agency and relevant reporting bureau. Then, using the options on the screen, select any additional search options to filter your results. On step 5, as shown here, select the Asset Detail Report option in the Report field, and then click Search. Continuing on, in step 6, on the results screen, you would then scroll down and locate the FRPP asset ID of the record you need to update. Click the Asset ID to access the Asset Record page. On the Asset Record page, you will see the Edit, Done, and Delete buttons in the top middle portion of the page as shown here in step 7. Click the Edit button to enter edit mode and make any necessary updates. If you need to remove the record from the current fiscal year inventory, then you would select the Delete button. Now, once you've made the desired updates based on the current fiscal year business rules, select the Save button, as shown here in Step 8. You can click Cancel to discard whatever changes you just made, or you can select the Reset button, which will wipe the entire record clean so you can start from scratch if that was needed. Now, if you have new assets that were not included in the previous fiscal year, or you have decided to start from scratch and enter individual records through the web form, you will need to create a new asset record. In order to add a new asset, the agency or bureau right user, as well as an agency administrator, would select the Add Asset tab as pictured in Step 1. Once the Add Asset screen, as pictured in Step 2, you can enter all of the required and optional data. Please note that a red bar on the left-hand side of a field means that it is a required field. Also, keep in mind that as you enter data into the required fields, other corresponding fields may become required as well. For example, if you set the real property type to building, then the square footage field becomes mandatory. I also want to bring to your attention the new Law Field Additions section. These are the new data elements which we briefly reviewed earlier and that will need to be entered or updated for fiscal year 2017. As a best practice, please use the data dictionary to help you understand what fields require alphanumeric or just numeric data, as well as to assist you in following the current fiscal year business rules. After entering all of the data, you should double check that every required field is filled in. You may then select the Save button, located at the top right and bottom right corners. If there are any errors in the form or threshold warnings, a list of specific fields that need to be updated in order to be compliant will be provided at the top of the form in red text. If you do not understand the errors or what you need to fix, the data dictionary will be a useful reference for you to utilize. In the case you need more help, you can surely contact the help desk. After correcting the errors, you would click the Save button once again. The asset will then become part of the agency or bureau's inventory for the current fiscal year. If you want to add another asset, you would repeat these steps. Select the Add Asset tab again, fill out the web form, and click Save. Easy as 1, 2, 3. Now I will demonstrate how to perform an asset search, to update an existing asset record, as well as how to add and delete a single asset record. Give me one moment to switch over to the platform. As a reminder, again, I'm logging in to a training sandbox, and I'm logged in as an administrative user, so I may see a few more areas or tabs that you may not normally have access to. So first we'll begin with finding an existing asset. So as we reviewed, we will come to the Asset Search tab, Okay, typically we would be on the current fiscal year, and just for training purposes, I will keep this as 2016. You would then select your reporting agency and reporting bureau. Okay, I'm going to select the using organization agency as well to limit my results, as well as the real property type and the legal interest. Now again, for today's purpose, I'm going to pretend that I'm looking for a particular record to update, of which I know the real property unique identifier. And just to make sure my results come back a little bit more quickly, I'm going to filter my search a little bit more with the country, state, and city. Okay. And then once I'm ready, I can click the search button in order to bring back my results. Okay, so then as we reviewed, again, I want to scroll down the results screen. In this case, I have one FRPP asset ID listed, but in the case that you have multiple ones, you would go ahead and locate the record of which you want to update, and then go ahead and click the ID link. This will then take you to the asset record page. Okay, so I'll just scroll down briefly so you can see the full page. Come back up, and in order to update, I'm going to go ahead and select the Edit button. Okay, so also, again, while here, you want to point out, as we saw in the screenshot, the new fields here and the new law field additions. This information has already been updated, but I'm going to go ahead and just, for training purposes, pretend that perhaps some of our costs and values have adjusted. We'll come in and just make some minor updates here. And then go ahead and click Save. Okay, best practices that maybe we also want to come back up and review the information. Make sure all the required fields are filled out. And then we can save that record. Okay, well, for training purposes, we'll go ahead and pretend that that's saved through as the training sandbox. Occasionally we run into errors, okay, but as you would just follow along that process in production. All right, now pretending that we had a new record to go ahead and update, we would use the Add Asset tab. And as reviewed in our steps, we're going to go ahead and enter in our reporting agency. For today's purpose, I'll use the General Services Administration for both for agency and bureau. Okay, I'm going to just fill out the required fields here for time's sake. Okay, so for the using organization agency, I'll take commerce for this example. And then economic affairs for our bureau. And status as future mission need. Okay, now for lease authority indicator, I'm going to select something that is not correct on purpose so you can see how the errors come through. I'll choose special purpose space for now, and then choose the comfort station. And we'll do our lease to expire about a year out in the future. Okay. And then continuing on, filling out the required fields here. This is going to be in the U.S. And make this in Virginia. Okay, our last two fields here. As you'll notice, I don't have to put in any dollar signs for the cost field. That will be put in automatically, as well as commas. So just whole numbers there, and then we can save that record. So coming up to the top, if you don't see anything happen, that typically means that there's an error, and I mentioned that I would be selecting something incorrectly on purpose. Okay, so here we're going to go back to making sure that our least authority indicator is categorical space. Double check that we have all required fields. Click Save. Okay. And then our record is saved. Okay, so that was how to update an existing record as well as how to add new. In the case that, again, you want to remove a record, I would come in and do a search, as we did earlier when we were updating an existing record. Remember that it's a similar process. So come to the Asset Search tab. Go ahead and select our reporting agency and bureau. And I'm going to just, for today's sake, go ahead and look for the item that I just created. So then we get our results. And similar again to the update process, we're going to scroll down, look for the asset ID for us that we want to remove. Click that ID to come to the record page. And instead of clicking the Edit button, as we did before, we can go ahead and click the Delete button. Now you will get a reminder from the system, making sure that this is what you'd like to do. In my case, I do. So we'll click OK. And this will remove the record from the existing inventory. Okay, so now let me return to the presentation now that I demonstrated those three processes. And next we will discuss how to submit the data via an XML file. As I mentioned before, submitting XML files is very useful for agencies or bureaus with large numbers of properties, as it would be quicker and less laborious. The XML schemas and templates used to submit, update, and delete asset records can be found in the data dictionary, as well as on the home page of the FRPP management system. So as with the individual process, I'd like to go ahead and review the overall process before we begin to review the steps on how to upload the XML file and review and validate the information. So here we see a high-level process diagram. And once again, at the beginning of each fiscal year, the GSA will copy all of the existing assets from the previous fiscal year and save them in the application to the current fiscal year. So again, agencies do not have to start from scratch. Now, the agency or bureau data submission users and the agency admin users need to decide a deletion strategy. We will discuss these options next in a bit more detail, but as an example, an agency administrator can perform what's known as an inventory clearance to remove all current fiscal year asset records, and then can submit via an XML file. The data submission user will then create and attach an updated XML file, which is then staged and validated by the system against the current business rules. There are various reports that the system will generate to let the user know if there are errors the data. As we continue, we will discuss the reports in greater detail. If errors exist, the user will then need to correct the data or possibly remove and reattach the XML file. After all errors are corrected, as indicated in Step 6, the agency administrator user would upload the file, thereby updating the agency's inventory for the current fiscal year. After that, the agency administrator user will confirm the process has been completed. This basically means that there will be no more updates for the related agency for that current fiscal year. Now, as we saw in the previous process overview, an important step is for agencies and bureaus to decide upon a deletion strategy before uploading an XML file. There are different deletion options available to help in determining a strategy for your agency or bureau. The first option is to individually delete records from your agency or bureau's inventory, which is done through the asset search as I just demonstrated. The second option is to delete batches of records from your agency's inventory using XML files with a delete action attribute. We will discuss this more in depth shortly. Lastly, the agency admin user can perform what's known as an inventory clearance. This is an automated process where all asset records in the current fiscal year inventory for an agency or bureau can be removed. Once the operation is completed, the agency administrator user will receive an email notification. We'll cover this process a bit later during the administrative functions section. As a reminder, the XML template that you'll be using to submit your data is available in the Appendix A of the Data Dictionary, which can be found by clicking on the hyperlink here or again on the application homepage. You also can find the XSD document zip file, which is located on the Home tab under the Document Library section. So on the left here on the screen, we see a sample snippet of the XML template. Take note of the first level of the XML file where you will find the action attribute, agency code, and fiscal year. The action attribute tells the system what to do with the file, and there are three options which need to be used independently. Add, which means to add new assets, modify, which means you are updating existing assets, and delete, which will remove assets. It is important to remember that you are not able to mix and match the action attributes throughout the file, meaning you cannot add an asset within the same file in which you are trying to delete an asset. You will need separate XML files for one action to complete on one or more asset records. So we just briefly discussed the creation of the XML file. And now we'll cover Step 5 more closely. In particular, how to stage an XML file in the system and review some of the related error reports. To attach and stage an XML file, to add, modify, or delete asset records, a data submission user or an agency administrator would select the Data Submission tab at the top left-hand corner of the screen, as indicated here in Step 1. Next, you would select the agency for which you would like to attach the file, and then click the Attach File button. Please keep your file size to 50 megabytes or less. If the file size exceeds this limit, please separate the data into separate files. For instance, you might separate the real property type if needed. You will notice, after selecting a corresponding agency, previously uploaded files and any related reports as the screen refreshes. After you have clicked the Attach File button, you will be brought to a new page to locate and attach the XML file, From here, you will click on the Choose File button to browse through your computer and find the file you would like to attach. Once the file is selected and appears listed on the screen, click the Attach File button. You can select multiple files if you wish. For instance, if you are performing more than one action. Finally, click the Done button once you've attached all of the files you'd like to attach. You will then return back to the data submission page. Now, once a file is submitted, the system will begin to process and validate the information. On the data submission screen, there will be 9 different file statuses to be aware of after submitting an XML file. Here we see the 7 existing ones, and I'll review the 2 new ones on the next slide. An invalid status means that the file has errors in it and the data business rules have failed. These errors need to be corrected by the agency admin or the data submission user. You can correct them directly in the system by running an error report, which we will discuss in a few moments. If you correct the file outside of the system, such as on your computer, you will need to remove the original file attached to the new one to be validated. A valid status means that there are no errors in the file, and the agency administrator can select the Upload button, and the records will be added to the inventory for that agency. Uploaded, when you see an uploaded status, this indicates that the agency administrator has already selected to upload the valid file. As such, the data within the file will be reflected in the current inventory. A remove or reload status means that a file was previously shown as invalid or invalid XML file from a previous fiscal year. It also could be the case where the file had been tagged as valid from the previous fiscal year, but it needs to be updated to reflect the current fiscal year, or removed. In this case, remove the file and reattach it for validation. A fiscal year validation failed status will appear if the fiscal year validation has failed. This means that the fiscal year hasn't been updated since the file has been uploaded in the system, and the associated records will have errors. A delete process status means that a valid file was attached, and it also had the delete action attribute that we mentioned earlier. This means that the delete action was immediately processed and all of the records were removed for the agency's current fiscal year. This is more of a notification status and less of an error status. An invalid XML file status means that the XML file that was uploaded did not have the current XML format or schema, and the system could not properly read the file. This could mean that there are typos or unwanted spaces. To rectify, you'll have to remove the original file, update the XML schema in the XML file, and reattach it so it can be validated once again. The 2 new statuses that you may see on the data submission page for XML files are Verify Thresholds and Drop Asset Identified. A Verify Threshold status means that the attached file contains a field value that falls outside of the allowed threshold. Please verify the accuracy or correct the data by using the Verify Thresholds error report. Once confirmed or fixed, XML file validation process resumes. A dropped asset identified status means that the attached file contains an expected error with the XML file and the system doesn't know how to process. An email will be sent to the technical support team and to the individual who uploaded the file. Please cease activity on this file until you receive resolution steps from the support team. Now returning back to our process, where we were taken back to the data submission page after uploading an XML file, you would select your agency from the drop-down list to display all of the staged XML files along with the related statuses and reports to help rectify any errors identified. Depending on the status that you receive, as pictured here in step 7, we have a few recommendations. If the status is remove and reload, fiscal year validation failed, or invalid XML file, remove the XML file and reattach after making corrections. If the status or threshold is is verify thresholds, use the threshold warnings report to fix. If the status is invalid, use one of the following error reports to manually fix the errors: validation summary report, detailed error report, or the data correction report. And lastly, if the status is dropped asset identified, please await an email from the support team before proceeding. Now, once the file is free of errors, you will need to notify your agency admin so he or she can then select the upload button within the upload column, as we see here in step 8. This can only happen once the status in column 7, or in the status column as shown in step 7, is valid. So we've made some recommendations on some of the error reports that you can utilize based on the statuses that you received. So now I'd like to review the error reports that I've recently named. One of the first reports to watch out for is the threshold warnings report, which will appear, again, if you receive the status of verify thresholds. This report will display the assets which have exceeded the value threshold set by the GSA in comparison to the previous fiscal year. Once in the report, you can select an asset ID to access the asset record in question. You will need to fix any errors first, as the system will continue to run validation checks until errors are fixed or the new values are confirmed. To fix errors, once on the asset record page, you would click the Edit button, update the necessary information, and click Save, as we had demonstrated earlier. Should all values be accurate, you can click the Current Year Data Correct button below the assets in question. Once you have fixed all errors, you can then validate any fields which are accurate using the Current Fiscal Year Data Accurate button, and then save the asset record. Another report is the Validation Summary Report. This report will display a summary of the validations and number of errors by asset type, such as land, building, and structure. The main purpose of the Validation Summary Report is to show the agency administrator and data submission users how many records are contained in the file, along with the total number of errors for the different asset types. These users can use the Detailed Error Report link or the Data Correction link towards the bottom to retrieve more information and rectify the errors within the system itself, if they choose. As an alternative, the XML file can be updated offline and attached once again for validation. If so, please remove the existing file before attaching the new file. The next type of report is the Detailed Error Report. This report displays all of the errors in the file at the data element level. Data submission users or agency administrators can select one of the unique FRPP asset IDs identified in the report to open a staged record and then correct the errors directly in the file. As users open up a record, they will have the option to click the Edit button and update what is missing or invalid, similar to an existing record modification process. After making the appropriate edits, you would click the Save button and update the record, and then return to the Data Submission tab to see if the file status has changed to valid. Lastly, the Data Correction Report essentially has the same functionality as the Detailed Error Report, but all of the errors for the attached file are displayed at an asset level and not at the data element level. The benefit of viewing errors at the asset level versus the data element level is that it shows the level of magnitude, which may affect how an agency decides to make corrections. Should you decide to make corrections in the system, follow the instructions we reviewed for the detailed error report. Alternatively, you can make corrections in the XML file offline, remove the original file from the system, and reattach the new one to be validated. As we move forward in our process, once the XML file or files are free of errors and have a valid status, you will need to notify your agency administrator so he or she can upload the file. I will now demonstrate how to attach an XML file, as well as highlight where to locate the file status and related reports in the system. So once again, give me a brief moment to switch over to the platform. I'll still be logged in with the administrator user I used earlier into the training sandbox. So as we reviewed, in order to upload an XML file, we're going to need to come to the Data Submission tab. And then we'll select our agency. And then click the Attach File button. But before I do, I wanted to show you there as the screen refreshed, you see that the currently staged files get listed. And then I can see the status here, as well as the related reports that I just reviewed. Okay, and as you can see here, with this particular file, it's ready to be uploaded then by the agency administrator. But let me show you first how to upload your own XML files. Once I click the Attach File button, I'm brought to a new screen where I can go ahead and then click Choose File to search my computer. I will select the one file I use for today's training purpose. Again, if you need more files, you'll go ahead and attach the file first. Make sure that gets listed on the screen, and then you can choose an additional file. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pretend that those are all the files I want to upload for now, and then I'll click the Done button. So again, as a reminder, depending on how large or how much information is in your file, it might take a few moments for the updates and statuses and reports to appear, but I can typically come back to the Data Submission tab, choose the agency for which I've uploaded the file, okay, and then you can see the process of the file that you've uploaded and then the status. So the current one that I've uploaded is now still in progress. I could come back perhaps once I get notified by email, as I mentioned, that when it's ready, it can return to the screen. But you can see a couple of the statuses that I've reviewed, here invalid, here dropped asset identified, okay, and then the valid one. And then to the right, you see the links to the reports in which you can go ahead and view more information, as well as rectify some of the errors that have been identified. Here's the new Verify Threshold status with the new Threshold Warnings report. Okay. For today's purpose, I'm not going to be clicking into the reports, as our system here as a training sandbox is not connected to a necessary third party, but I wanted to make sure that you were able to see at least where to go, and you can use our presentation as a review of the steps to follow for depending on your status and reports that you get provided. Okay, so now that I've demonstrated how to upload an XML file, I will come back into the presentation and we'll move forward. Okay, so where we are now in the process that we've been reviewing is our last step, step 7, which is for the agency administrator to run reports and confirm the data. Okay, we're going to pretend that we had seen valid statuses on our files, and the agency administrator has already uploaded the file into the system. So the last step is for the agency administrator to go ahead and run some reports that I'll show you briefly, and then hit what's known as the Confirm button on the Data Submission tab in order to indicate that the process for the agency is complete. Okay, so when we get, you can see here the second section within the Data Submission tab is the Reports and Confirm Data section. This section allows the appropriate users to review information that was updated for an agency. This includes both XML files that were submitted as well as any individual asset records that were added through the web form, okay, or perhaps updated. Now, as you can see here, there are 7 reports available. The agency administrators are strongly encouraged to run all of the reports as an accuracy check once the files have been uploaded or once all of the bureaus and sub-agencies have indicated that their process is complete. While data submission users and agency admins can run these reports, the agency administrator will be the only user to be able to confirm the data in the system, as we see here with the Confirm button. Once the agency administrator selects the Confirm button and 0 errors occur, then the data submission process for an agency or bureau will be considered complete for the current fiscal year. So now let's review asset searches a little bit in more detail. Here we see a list of the different reports that are available to generate on the system. The important thing to take away from this slide is that the asset staging report is accessible only to the data submission users and the agency administrators. The remaining reports are only accessible by the right users and the agency administrators. As you might remember from earlier, in order to perform a search for a particular asset, a data submission user or agency admin would select the Asset Search tab. Once the page loads, you would select the desired criteria to filter and narrow down your search, and you're not required to choose an option from each category. The only required field is the report type. In the report field, pictured here in step 3, is where you will find the different types of reports to choose from. After you finish making your selections, click on the Search button at the top right-hand corner to generate the report. Now, unlike what I showed earlier, you do have the ability to go ahead and print this report or have a personal copy on your computer's hard drive. If this is something you'd like to do, you can go ahead and choose the Printable View button from the report page. When you select the Printable View button, the system gives you the option to save it as an Excel file to your computer. Choose a location on your computer and select Save. This operation will maintain the integrity of the report format based on the criteria used to generate the report. You will see that there is an export option as well. However, this will be a raw dump of the data into an Excel file. Thus, we recommend the printable view for better viewing and sharing. Now, along the line of reports, we understand that some users are trying to create new reports. We highly encourage the use of the existing reports that have been set up in the system through the Asset Search tab that we just reviewed. If you'd like to create your own reports, though, there are a few important steps to remember when doing so. First, you want to be sure you select the FRPP_asset report type. Then, when on the new report page, please add these filters to ensure you're getting the best and most accurate results. Fiscal year should equal the current fiscal year. Asset record type would be set to uploaded, and active would be set equal to true. So let me go ahead and demonstrate how to go ahead and generate a report, as well as how to download, and then I'll also remind you of the important considerations when creating a new report. So I'll come back to the system. Okay, we'll come back to the Home tab as if we've just logged in. And once again, we're going to come to the Asset Search tab. For today's purpose, I'm going to create a limited search using the GSA as my example. And let's see if we get some results in Sacramento. Okay, so we did get one result. Depending on how limited your search results have been filtered or how many criteria you've selected to filter your search, it'll depend on how many records you have access to. You also will only be able to access the bureau or agency to which you were assigned and the related information. Okay, so as I noted earlier, okay, unlike what we did earlier, which is to go into the particular asset record page, here I want to remain on the report page. And as we saw in the screenshot, we're going to go ahead and select the printable view. So I'm using Chrome, and that downloads it automatically. Depending on the browser you are using, it might prompt you to save, as I noted earlier. But here I'll open up this Excel file for you to quickly view. Okay, so you can see that it tells us what type of report has been generated and by whom, as well as the filters that have been applied, and then your results. Okay, so mine is a little limited in terms of the number of results, but yours could vary. But as you can see here, the format was maintained, and all of the information kept in the order in which we saw within the system. Okay, so that's typically something that we recommend versus the export details, but you can surely work with the system and see what works best for you. Now, as we noted earlier, also some individuals are creating new reports. So I'm going to come to the Reports tab in order to do that. And when I click on the New Report button here, the first reminder that we talked about was to make sure that you're utilizing the FRPP _asset type. If I start typing that here, it'll limit the search or limit the items that I can go ahead and select from. So I'm going to click on the FRPP asset type and then scroll down here to click Create. Now, once you begin to go ahead and build your report, again, you want to go ahead and add the filters that I noted earlier. You click the Add Filter button here, and then can begin to type in the elements that we're looking for. So fiscal year, again, we want it equal to the current fiscal year in your production system. You'll most likely have 2017. Here for the training purposes, I'll use what's in the system. Our second filter we want to add is asset record type. Okay, it's going to be set equal to uploaded. This will mean that everything has been validated and uploaded by the administrator that would be coming through on the report. And then lastly, we want active. So we select that element equal to true. Okay. And then you can see that the FRPP asset ID is a field that's already there. We can then begin to look at what fields we also want within our report. Okay, so I can just drag a couple over. Just to show you the different, that's a drag and drop environment. And in case we want to reorder as well, we can do that. Okay, so once you've gotten all of your fields that you would like to view, and in the order that you'd like to view them, you can then run the report. Okay, and then as I showed earlier, you can use the printable view to take an offline copy for your records, or if you'd like to modify further within Excel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and return back to the presentation. And in one of our last sections, we'll review some of the administrative functions to show a couple of the housekeeping items that agency administrators might want to perform. And one of those first items is how to conduct a user search. Now, the agency administrator users will have access to the Administration tab. So on this tab, the agency administrator will then see the first area here, the user search, as identified in step 2. Okay, so it's possible to be associated with more than one agency. So if you are, for instance, associated with Department of Interior and Department of Homeland, you would be able to view all users within those 2 agencies. Now, as you can see here in step 3, you can go ahead and conduct a search and filter your search using the criteria here. And you can see that here in the results, once you've clicked search in step 4, is where the results appear. Now there is an access level column here. So as a reminder, in case that you do need for some reason to update the access level, okay, or perhaps that a user has been locked out of the system if they haven't reset their password, or if tried to reset their password and were unsuccessful, you can go ahead and let them contact and direct them to the help desk. Okay, now for agency administrators who would like to conduct an inventory clearance that we discussed earlier, this is also something available on the Administration tab, but on the second area here, as we see in inventory clearance in step 2. The agency administrator would then choose the agency for which they'd like to remove the information, and up to 5 bureaus here in the bureau area. Now, as we discussed earlier, you would clear an agency's inventory if you had a discussion with the data submission user and he or she agreed that they wanted to start from scratch to submit the data for the current fiscal year. Or, again, perhaps you want to start anew with a large volume of new records. Please note that data submission users do not have the permission to clear an agency's or bureau's inventory. This is strictly limited to the agency administrator users. Now, once an inventory is cleared, there will be a log of the different inventory clearances that have been performed for the selected agency or bureau. The system will indicate the data that the clearance process took place. The system will indicate the date that the clearance process took place, the status, and the individual who cleared the inventory. When a process is completed, the status will change from queued to completed. Please note that you will not see the individual records that have been cleared from the system. Those are removed for good. You want to make sure that you are being careful since there isn't a back or undo button or a recycle bin for this process. So now that we've reviewed the brief steps for these 2 functions, let me go ahead and come back to the system to demo how to do a user search and how to conduct an inventory clearance. Okay, so assuming that I'm logged into the system, I come in as an agency administrator user. Again, I'm going to come to the Administration tab. And then I'm going to select the agencies for which I'm looking for to which the users may be assigned, and I can limit my search if I'd like further. And then I can go ahead and click the search button. So then as you can see, the results come up along with the different items here in our results table. There is also a download button in case you would like to take this information offline. All right, also on the Administration tab, the second sub-tab we see here is the Inventory Clearance. Again, to remove asset records in bulk. In order to do that, you would select the agency for which you're looking to remove. And as you do that, you have the bureaus that are associated. Again, you can select up to 5. In case you're not familiar, you can use the Control button to select multiple items here in the list. All right, and again, you can choose up to 5, and then you would select the Clear Inventory button. For today, I'm not going to complete that process, but you can see here the previous inventories that have been cleared and the date, okay, also by whom, and then the status. Okay, so now I'm going to return to the presentation to make sure that you are aware of our help desk information in the case that you have further questions or need support as you're utilizing the platform. In order to contact the help desk, please email frppms@gsa.gov or call the phone number listed here. Once you contact the help desk in either form, it is very important to include your full name, the agency and or bureau to which you're affiliated, the best way to get a hold of you, the browser that you were using when you encountered the error, along with the steps that you followed, and if you can, the screenshots of the problem, issue, or error that you encountered. And once submitted, particularly via email, the technical team will attempt to reproduce and resolve the issue as quickly as possible. If they do have questions, they will contact you to discuss further.